Ari Lewis Show.
Welcome everybody to today's episode of the Ari Lewis Show here on Israel Sports and News Radio. Thank you for joining us. At any time, you can email the show at arilewishow@hotmail.com, or you can email the station Israel Sports and News Radio at gmail.com. Another All-Star game is in the books for Major League Baseball, and another MVP trophy to Mike Trout. The game was played on Tuesday, July 14th. The American League is victorious, which means they will have home field in the World Series. Here to discuss this and more about Major League Baseball is Radio Mike from Kew Garden Hills. Back to the program. Radio Mike, how you doing out there?
Okay, good. How are you doing, Ari?
I think things are going well. So Mike Trout at 23 picks up his second All-Star MVP award in the span of 1 year. And now the American League will have home field advantage. They had it last year. Didn't help the Royals in Game 7. The Giants were able to win that on the road. And this rule has been around for a few years. I want to know your thoughts on it and your thoughts on Mike Trout picking up another All-Star MVP award.
Well, you got a bunch of questions there. Let's go with what I think about an All-Star game having any sort of meeting, to have the home field advantage for the winner of the AL versus the NL. Whoever wins the All-Star game gets that special privilege. So it turned out, like, as you said, the last year wasn't much of an advantage. So, how much does a player from Philadelphia care who wins the All-Star game so they can get that seventh game? Most of the players aren't going to be in obviously most aren't even, their teams are almost eliminated right now, like Colorado and, Philadelphia. Atlanta's probably not going to make it. So how much do they really care to win? I mean, a player always wants to win. They always want to do well, but it doesn't make much of a difference as far as they're concerned. They're not really thinking about that seventh game for the World Series. And I don't know of any All-Star game that has any sort of meaning to it. Not in hockey, not in basketball, football. Nobody really cares to really put pressure on the players to get that seventh game or any special bonus.
So if you were in charge, you would change the rule?
I would probably do away with it because it really doesn't add much to the game. And you asked me about Mike Trout, so Mike Trout, he's probably going to win the MVP again, he's just fantastic. He has 23 he's 23 years old. I think he has 26 home runs already this year. But he's special. He's better than any other player in the American League because, he has speed. He steals bases. He's a great fielder. I saw a couple catches he made against the Yankees a couple weeks ago. He's one of those special players out there, and he's only 23 years old. If he keeps his head on straight and doesn't have any major injuries, he can really be something special.
Well, let me ask you, because there were a couple of those years Miguel Cabrera won the Triple Crown, and actually David Dobin used to come on the show, thought Mike Trout still should have won the MVP because of all the bases he stole, all the runs he scored. Right now, Trout's batting, you're right, he does lead the American League in home runs. He's tied with his teammate Albert Pujols, but he's batting .312. And when you look at Miguel Cabrera, he's batting about .350. He only has 15 home runs. But as of right now, you still think Mike Trout is the leader for the MVP at this point?
Oh, absolutely. If you look at the complete package, there's no doubt that Mike Trout should get it. He's been injured a lot. Cabrera's been injured a lot. The team, I believe, is like 500. MVP, you should be like in first place, and the Angels now are in first place. I mean, the Astros were in first place till right before the All-Star break, but it's much better to go with a team that's in first place. In Detroit, they don't look like they're going to make it this year.
That's true, and that will be a factor, obviously, if the team wins the division or not. That's my opinion, at least, of how the MVP should be decided. Should be based on how the team finishes up. So let's go to some of the teams so far in Major League Baseball, and let's talk about, I guess, surprises. You made predictions on this program before the season started. Any surprises that you find up to this point? We're about halfway through the season in the MLB.
Well, I think if you want to have a disappointment so far, I think it would be Seattle. Everyone thought that, with Nelson Cruz going to Seattle, he's done very well. He has, I think, 21 home runs. He's added a lot of power to Seattle, and with their great pitching, that Seattle would be doing a lot better. but if you look at the standings, Seattle's been a terrific disappointment. They're 7 games behind the Angels, even with King Felix pitching there. Cano has really tailed off. We've discussed that before. His good days are really, really way behind him. So Seattle's been a real disappointment. Everyone thought that they might win the division and maybe even make it to the World Series, and they just don't look like a solid team right now.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think a lot of people had them picked pretty high because you talk about Nelson Cruz. Do you think, anything that Seattle could do, or they're going to probably 41-48 is the record right now. They're probably giving up on this season. You don't think they would try to make a move and make a run at the division?
Well, they've already spent a ton of money on Cano. The Yankees, they were very smart. People were yelling, how could the Yankees give up on Cano? But a lot of times it's better to give up a player like 1 or 2 years early than keep him signed for an extra 8 years because, players just don't perform at the same level. They get a little bit older. They don't see the fastball as well or the curveball. They're missing a step of speed, or their arm is just throwing too many pitches. Sometimes you have to just break away from those good ball players and get rid of them.
So you're pretty happy the Yankees didn't sign him to that god?
Yeah, well, it's another problem that the Yankees don't exactly have a great second baseman. They just brought up a player right before the All-Star break, and he did hit a 2-run homer against the Red Sox that helped the Yankees win a game. The Yankees signed Stephen Drew, and he's been hitting a solid 180 through the first half of the season. So he's been pretty disappointing also. So the Yankees can use a second baseman, and they have another guy there, Perella. But I'm kind of happy that we don't have a guy in Cano. I think he has like about 5 home runs now, so it's not like the old Robinson Cano. So you got to go with the best players you have, and Cano is not the guy.
All right, so we talked about surprise from a negative perspective. What about surprise from a positive perspective? Who has impressed you in a surprising way in the first half of the Major League season?
Well, you got to say that Minnesota's done very, very well. No one predicted that they would even be close to the top. They're in second place right now, about 5 games behind Kansas City. If the season ended today, they would be the wild card team in the American League. So they've done very well. They don't have great hitters. They don't have great pitchers, but somehow they just put it together, and they've done very well. So I would say Minnesota's been a very big, pleasant surprise. Houston also. They had a very poor season 2 years ago. They turned it around and won more games last year, even though they had a losing record last year. But they've made a lot of progress, and they're just in second place, half a game behind the Angels. So they've impressed me a lot, and they might make the playoffs as a wild card team as well.
Again, this is the Ari Lewis Show here on Israel Sports and News Radio, talking about the Major League Baseball season with Radio Mike. I want to hop over to the NL West because the Giants are the defending champions. I think sometimes people forget that. They still were not the favorites going into this season, even though they're the reigning champs, and they've won 3 World Series titles since 2010. Kind of crazy. Right now, they're not in the division lead. The Dodgers are. Giants are 46-43. If people were looking for a team, like a dark horse team, even though they're defending champions, but because they're not in first place right now, would you tell them to go with the Giants?
Well, you could say that. They still have Madison Baumgartner. He's had a very good season. They have this other pitcher who threw a no-hitter against the Mets, Heston. So he's been very good. They could do it again. They still have Posey. They don't have Sandoval anymore, who, for some odd reason, I think he had the same offer as the Red Sox, but he opted to go to the East Coast to the Red Sox instead of staying put in San Francisco. So that turned out to be a big mistake on his part. The fans like them, so why not stick it out over there? It's suffer along making $10 million a year in San Francisco. So now you're making $10 million a year in Boston, and you're not doing it as well, and the fans there are getting on you. So I guess that's not been a very good fit there in Boston for Pablo Sandoval. But San Francisco, they do have a good chance. Another team that I did predict to make it to the playoffs as a wild card team, and they're only 2 games behind first place, are the New York Mets. Their fielding sometimes is just awful. Their hitting is awful, but they got great starting pitching. Some of the relief pitching is pretty good. If they get another bat, maybe they get not even a great bat. They get like Ben Zobrist from Oakland. That could just help them, get a couple runs. Maybe Granderson will get hot, and they'll have a good offense there and win some games and certainly make it as a wild card team. I still don't see them catching Washington with their great pitching with Scherzer and other players, and they have Harper. But, the Mets should make it there if they get one more bat. They should really concentrate on that, get a little offense there. David Wright's been injured, and God knows if he's ever going to come back. Flores, at shortstop, he has a lot of home runs for a shortstop. He has 10 home runs. He's one of the team leaders, as pathetic as that sounds. And Kadire, they can make a run for it, the Mets, and I hope they do.
The Nationals, you like them at the beginning of the year. Their first place over the Mets by 2 games, 48-39 is their record. You still feel pretty confident that the Nationals will make the postseason, I take it?
Yes, the Nationals will make it. Why they haven't played that well yet is anyone's mystery. They're only, as you said, 9 games over 500. I predicted that they're going to win the division by 12 to 15 games. I still stand by that, but they have a lot of good starting pitchers, and their hitting is good. Some of their fielding at shortstop especially has been pretty lax. But they'll make it. There's no doubt that the Nationals will make the playoffs, and they'll win the National League East, which is a pretty weak division.
Now, moving over to National League Central, I had on Barry Bloom from MLB.com to talk about the scandal involving the St. Louis Cardinals, who apparently, or some of their representatives, not the players obviously, but people in the front office spy, they say, on the Astros. That's the investigation. I asked Barry if he thought it would affect the players, and he said no. The players are on the field playing. It appears it hasn't really affected them. 56-33, first place in the Central, only 2.5 over Pittsburgh, but they're having a solid year. What do you see happening down the stretch in the Central?
Well, you see, Pittsburgh's having another good season there. They have Cole. I think he has 13 wins to lead baseball in that. You have Burnett. He's very up and down, but he has an ERA of like 2.1. McCutchen is a perennial MVP candidate. They've done very, very well lately. They're only, as you said, 2.5 games behind St. Louis. They were a little disappointment last year and not quite, making it. They made it, I believe, into the playoffs, but they didn't go. And I think they got eliminated the first game. So they really want to win the division. And even though St. Louis has had a very good season, they're only up by 2.5 games. So you have the 2 best teams in the National League fighting it out in the Central Division. St. Louis and Pittsburgh, they both are over 600, and it makes a big difference if you win the division or if you're a wild card team. So it's gonna, Pittsburgh's doing very well. I know you're a St. Louis fan, but they're only up by 2.5 games, and Pittsburgh's coming.
Yeah, I am a bit nervous. I mean, considering how well the Cardinals have played, and the Pirates are right there. I am a bit nervous about them. I do think the Cardinals will pull it out of the end. They seem to have that trend. They're one of the best franchises in Major League Baseball, period, but especially in the last 10 years. A couple World Series titles, World Series appearances, playoffs, etc. I think they'll get it done at the end. Again, this is the Ari Lewis Show here on Israel Sports and News Radio, joined by Radio Mike from Kew Garden Hills. We're going to jump over to the American League, talk about how well Trout's doing. Looks like he'll win the MVP. He's the front runner. Angels 48-40, but only a half-game lead over Houston. You talked about how well Houston is doing. So at the end of the day, who do you think will win the West?
Well, I think the Angels will win. Pujols, for what it's worth, he signed for big money. He's had some off seasons, but this year he's doing very, very well. So Pujols and Trout, and you have a couple other players there. I do kind of like the L.A. Angels. They seem to, maybe they've righted their ship a little bit. They still have a great manager in Mike Scioscia, so that should make a big difference. And, I'm going to go with the Angels, and I think Houston, they've had a great season, and I think they'll still do well. But I think the Angels should pull it out.
And Scioscia's one of the longest tenured coaches in all sports. And he was a catcher when he played for the Dodgers, and he was on the '88 championship team. It's just interesting, Radio Mike, that a lot of the great managers in Major League Baseball, they were catchers when they were players. You saw Brenly with the Diamondbacks, and Joe Torre was a catcher as well in one of those titles of the Yankees.
The current manager for the New York Yankees, Joe Girardi. He wasn't a great catcher, but he called a good game, and he's very cerebral and knows the game inside out. These catchers are smart guys. They put on their gear called tools of ignorance, but most of them are very, very smart guys. They know how to call a great game. Another fellow that we know very well, Brad Alsmith. He's supposed to have the reputation of being the smartest guy in baseball altogether, and of course he was the manager for Israel in the World Baseball Classic. That didn't help much, but Brad Alsmith was a catcher for many years with Houston and Detroit as well.
Yeah, great point. And guest on this program, very nice. He's the current manager of the Detroit Tigers, so another catcher. If you look, it's probably the most popular position of all the positions that ends up going into management is catcher. All right, let's go over to the Central. Again, Kansas City was in the World Series last year. That was the first time they were in the postseason since 1985. They're first place. They actually have probably the biggest margin of all the division leaders because they have a 4.5 game margin. They're tied. The Dodgers also have 4.5. So Kansas City's 4.5 ahead of Minnesota. What do you think will happen at the end down the stretch with the Central?
Well, I didn't think Kansas City would be doing all that well, but they did get a couple hitters in the off season. As you said, now they have that 4.5 game lead over Minnesota. Minnesota's done much better than anyone thought. Detroit seems to be really, as we see, an average team, 500. So the bullpen with Kansas City is probably the best in all of baseball. So I think Kansas City is going to hold on and win the division.
All right, of course, let's move over to the AL West. Your favorite division, I take it. Yankees, 3.5 game lead over Tampa Bay. Baltimore's 4 games behind. Boston in the cellar, if you will. They're only 6.5 back, but they are 42 and 47. Are you happier the Yankees are in first place or that Boston is in last place?
That's a very good question. I think that the Yankees are in first place. That's really great. If the Yankees weren't in first place and Boston was in last place, I'd still be happy. But it's really great that the Yankees are in first. And if you look at the team, I mean, they do have some question marks there, but their starting pitcher's okay. They might have to go out and get another starting pitcher, but their relief pitching between Betances and Andrew Miller is the best 1-2 punch to close off a game. Their hitting has been much better. They've scored the second most runs in the American League. The only team that has scored more runs is the Toronto Blue Jays. But this is a division, I said this back in April when we talked about my predictions, and the Red Sox are 6.5 games back. But the Yankees are up by 3.5 over Tampa. But any team gets hot over a 10-game period, they can end up in first place. It's still anyone's division. Everyone's really, really bunched up together. I think the Yankees can win it. Tampa, I don't know how they do it. Their pitching, somehow they always get it. They have Archer. They lose David Price. Longoria's not having a great season, but certainly a good enough season. Baltimore's fallen off a little bit. Toronto, if they ever get a relief pitcher that can close off games, I believe they have 14 blown saves. The record for saves are 14 out of 28. So if they ever get a closer, and they really should, because there are a lot of closers out there that have done very well this year, give away some of your offense, I think they've outscored other teams by 75 runs this season over the Yankees, the Yankees are number 2 and Toronto's number 1. So if Toronto ever gets a closer there, and between all their great hitting stars, Encarnacion and Batista, they can win the division too.
And, of course, let's talk about your favorite guys. Of course, tongue-in-cheek, Alex Rodriguez, Yankees DH, having a very, very excellent year. 278, 18 home runs, 51 RBI, 48 runs. Did you think he deserved to go to the All-Star game, first of all?
Yeah, I did think he should be in the All-Star game. I don't know of any designated hitter that even had close to his numbers. He didn't get much consideration. When he didn't get on that ballot, and then you get to vote, put a couple players on. So the Yankees, I'm not sure whose decision it is, if it's the Yankees' decision or it's Major League Baseball, but, the fans get to vote to get the last one or two players on that roster. So the Yankees got Brett Gardner as a nominee there, and the fans did put him in, and Brett Gardner's had a very, very good season. So I'm not sure if the Yankees couldn't put two people on the ballot, because I think you just had a choice to put one, and they opted for Brett Gardner, and he was very deserving to be a reserve in the All-Star game. So, but Alex has had a great season, and he should have been there as well.
And what's interesting is career home runs, he just hit his 670th on Friday. So assuming he continues his pace and plays another year, he'll probably pass Babe Ruth. How does that make you feel, Radio Mike?
If the Yankees win and A-Rod does well, I'm happy. I know what he's done in the past with steroids and this and that. I don't really care. If my team wins, I don't care how they basically do it. It's, like Belichick and the Deflategate with the football. If you win that football game, you won. If you won the baseball game, you won. That there's a little bit extra steroids there. Well, Boston did that also with Ortiz. He did some, he was taking steroids, and most teams do it as well. But it's not just the steroids that are going to make you a winner. It's all the teams. You have to have good pitching. You have to have speed, youth, fielding, hitting. So it's not just, taking steroids and, one player or two players, and that's going to put you over the top. And hopefully right now he's clean. So if he passes Babe Ruth, the fans are going to be happy. And if the Yankees win, the fans are going to be even happier.
Well, the argument could be made that while he took steroids, again, assuming if he's clean now, but while he took steroids, that he's playing against steroid pitchers. So some could say it kind of evens itself out. Some say not. But how about this? Let's say he's for sure not taking steroids now, and he's most likely not. He would have to be really, really incompetent. He's already been busted twice, basically, and he would have even a bigger suspension. He missed all of last year, pretty much. So let's put it like this. Let's say he ends up getting 40 home runs. He's at 18 now, about halfway through the year. So let's say he gets to 40. Let's say he gets to 100 RBI. He bats 278. Imagine if he did it every year clean. I mean, he would still be one of the greatest players ever.
That's correct. Yeah, he would have been one of the greatest players ever when he came up. I don't think he was taking steroids when he was 20 years old, 22 years old, and he put up great numbers back then. So he would have been great. Some players like Barry Bonds, he took steroids. Everyone knows he took steroids. He was doing very well when he came up as a Pirate, and he was doing well with the Giants. But, he always hit like 25 home runs, 20 home runs, 30 home runs. And then when he started taking the steroids with the Giants, he went up to 70, So that was, a total joke, and he was hitting the ball 500 feet. He was a very good player, an excellent player, but he wasn't a Hall of Fame player. And I think that is the difference between like Bonds and A-Rod. A-Rod probably would have been, like, as you said, a Hall of Famer, if not for the fact, that with or without steroids, he still would have been a Hall of Famer.
All right, again, this is the Ari Lewis Show here on Israel Sports News Radio. A last Major League Baseball question. You like Trout to win the MVP in the AL. Who do you like to win the MVP in the National League?
I would say Harper. He's having a really good season with the Nationals. He has a lot of home runs. He's also a five-tool player, and as I said, the Nationals will win the National League East. So it's always good that MVP goes to a team that wins the division. So it should be good for him to win.
Especially if they end up winning the division, by 14 games, as you predict in April. That's going to put a lot of attention on Harper. And a lot of people thought in the past few years Harper was going to win. That was their pick. That was the Sheik pick before the beginning of the year. And maybe Harper will get it done this time again. Yeah, talk about 339 batting average, 26 home runs behind Stanton, Miami, and just a phenomenal year. So we'll see what happens. Let's go real quick in the last 2 minutes we have left. You talk about the NFL. as preseason is about to be upon us in a couple of weeks. I know you're a big Giants fan. 2 Jewish players, 2 Jewish linemen, the Schwartz brothers. One of them plays for the Giants. They don't get a lot of attention because the linemen don't do a lot of stats, but just want to get your thoughts about 2 Jewish brothers playing in the National Football League.
Well, if you remember last year, we did a whole segment on them. Jeff Schwartz and Mitch Schwartz. Jeff Schwartz playing for the Giants and Mitch Schwartz playing for the Cleveland Browns. And then at a fundraiser for an organization called Maor, Jeff Schwartz was one of the honorees, and he spent the day with everyone there, and we played ball on the field. And at the buffet, I was right behind him there, and it was incredible seeing a fellow who's like about 6'4", 6'5", 320 pounds, very, very lean, really soft-spoken, nice fellow. And not too many people know that Jeff Schwartz, his Hebrew name is Gedalia, and his brother Mitch Schwartz, who plays for Cleveland, his Hebrew name is Mendel. So people find out that his name is Mendel. Offensive or defensive linemen are going to be yelling, Mendel, Mendel. But I still wouldn't start with a guy who's like 6'4", 320, 330 pounds. So even though his name might be Mendel, I think he's okay. Jeff Schwartz, he only played 2 games last year. He had a toe injury, and the Giants are really counting on him to do better. They need better protection for Eli Manning. He's had his ups and downs. I still like Eli Manning a lot, but if you don't have a running game, you don't have any pass protection, what are you supposed to do? The same thing with Mitch Schwartz out in Cleveland. They had one of the worst running games in the NFL. And he's a proven really good offensive lineman. So hopefully they'll continue and they'll have good seasons.
All right, last question I have to ask you again. I know you're a huge Giants fan. What is the deal with Jason Pierre-Paul? He apparently blows off his finger in a July 4th celebration of fireworks, and the Giants were going to give him a lot of money before that happened. They were going to make him the franchise player, and apparently he didn't want that, and everything got leaked about his finger. And I mean, I don't know what exactly the Giants will do, but give us your take about that situation. And I guess, is it his fault that he hung around a July 4th fireworks display? You figured you're about to sign a contract, maybe keep your fingers in a safe place.
Yeah, well, you do have to be careful as a human being, whether you're going to be signing a big contract or not, you got to be careful. You can't be messing with fireworks. You can't be doing stupid stuff. He got his index finger blown off, and I believe his right thumb was fractured. So this was really, a major injury. And they say that if you don't have use of one of your fingers, like the index fingers, the power in your arm goes down by 40%. So he didn't sign the contract ahead of time. He was going to sign the contract. I think he was holding out for a little bit more money. And then now the Giants probably won't offer him anything. If they do, it's going to be much, much, much less money. But even if he would have signed the contract, it still wouldn't have made a hill of beans, because if you get your finger blown off in a firecracker incident, your contract probably could have been voided, even if you had signed for the big bucks. If it's something normal, God forbid a person gets cancer or gets sick, that's another question that might be worked out with insurance companies, at the protection that teams get. But something like this, when you're partying too much and maybe you had a little bit too much to drink and you get part of your finger and part of your hand blown off, his career might be over, and if he does play, it can be really, really hampered, and he's not going to make nearly as much money now.
Yeah, it's really a shame, and I've been told that there's really been no lineman in history in the NFL to play at a high level without all 10 of their fingers. And great point. I mean, people think, too bad he didn't sign the contract before this happened, but even if he would have, most contracts have a clause that if you do something reckless, something that is not the smartest move, you could forfeit the contract depending on the situation. But we'll see what happens to the Giants nonetheless, and I do hope he does feel better, recover the best way he can. Jason Pierre-Paul, excuse me. This has been another episode of the Ari Lewis Show here on Israel Sports and News Radio. My guest has been Radio Mike from Kew Garden Hills. Radio Mike, thank you for being on the program today. Great job as always, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. Be well.